going to continue to work on what I started yesterday. I was able to fix the thing that was wrong with the functions. Yesterday I opened the project and I realized what was the mistake and I was able to fix it. So now the plan is to change the way that it works here, because instead of working with the props, when I receive the props to put layout, I want to make the layout triggered based on the state of the store. Because I think what I'm gonna do is put the layouts on the custom component, the customization component, and like the default state is gonna be the way that the VJS is. So that's what I'm gonna try to do today. And the way that it works now is it receives the props from here and then passes the props inside of this function, and then it calls the transform graph, which changes the position. And the only thing that the layout does is figure out the final position for the layout. So you have the beginning position, which is the position that I set a node in the beginning of when I build the graph, which I think, yeah, is this function here. So, and the other one is the update layout, which is going to be this one. And that defines the layout here. And this is another thing that I'm thinking about doing now, is instead of doing things like this in this function, I want to separate them, and I want to, I guess I can leave this file. I'm still thinking about what to do. Because this, it seems like, the problem with this one is that instead of doing things like this, I want to be able to put the custom components and allow people to place whatever props, I'm not sure how to say that, like whatever attributes they want into the layout instead of selecting for them. So this is the thing. So I think I'm gonna have to change this function. Maybe I will leave this function here, but I will create other functions, and then based on the other functions, I'm gonna select. And the other functions are gonna be just this file here, or the other layouts that exist here. And then I'm just gonna put the default state and then hopefully allow for customization. So I have to figure that out. And maybe I should show. So what I did was change the nodes that it was receiving to work with the node mesh instead. So before it was working with these nodes here, and now I'm passing the node meshes and I put it here. And the problem that I was having is the link here because of this thing here. So the way that it works is this part creates a simulation, which is just an object that is it works like an API that has key value pairs, and the values are functions. So this force here is a function from the other project, and then you pass the name, and it's gonna cache the functions, the forces, into a map based on the second argument. So the second argument is gonna be the force, which is also an object that has functions as well, and then it's gonna map that on the simulation. So the first part here is just a setup, and it doesn't change the nodes. So in the beginning, it tries to initialize the nodes, but if you don't pass anything as an argument here, then it doesn't initialize anything. And there is a function that initializes the nodes, and that function puts the attributes on the whatever object you pass, which is going to be x and y, x, y, and z, and vx, vy, and vz for the velocities. So you can pass whatever object you want. But then in this function here, this is going to be the one that finds the node, because it's trying to create the forces on the edge. I still didn't spend a bunch of time on this one. So it pretty much gets the force that initialized here from the map of the simulation. So it's gonna be the link force, and then it's gonna call the ID method on the link force, and it's gonna try to find the node based on the ID. But before it was like this, so the node meshes don't have the idea of the node meshes. They exist, but they're different because they come from three.js. So although the ID existed, it couldn't find the node because it was the wrong attribute. So I'm putting the IDs on the three.js objects by with node ID instead because of that. So when I changed, it worked. And then on the other ones, I think I still haven't seen the hierarchical, but the other ones use graphology instead of using the tree. But the only thing I think you have to do is just figure out this one. It just returns a mapping of the node ID with the positions. So I'm passing the node meshes here. Was passing the drags instead in the previous way. And then I'm looping over the meshes, and I'm putting which is not that good because it's an extra loop, but I think it doesn't matter that much because of the way that I'm gonna do things now, I think. So the biggest thing is that the layout just puts the position, so I don't even need the nodes. It's just like and the transform function sets the positions from the initial one to the final one from the layout. So what I want to do is instead is just activate that layout when you click a button, for example, on the customization component. So that's what I'm going to do now. I think to do that, I have to just change. The most annoying part is this because of the rendering cycle of React. I'm going to put some music. I have to spend some time thinking about it, on what's the best way to go about doing this. I think it doesn't matter if the beginning state is like just the random positions of the nodes, as long as the customization component works. So the idea that I want is to be able to have the Vue.js simulation by default, so the physics, and then if you click, then it changes the positions. So it's going to be a function that sets the layout and then changes the positions of the nodes based on the layout. But the issue is that there are several, as always, there's several different ways to do the same thing. So that's the hard part. I think one way is to put the layout. The problem is I don't want to put the layout function on the store. I was thinking about doing another function and then creating a value on the store that calls that function. Because if I put the function directly, it's going to be too big, I think. Just select the layout like this function here. So maybe I can just call this function. I also have to see what values are passed to the store. I think all the values are passed to the store. It doesn't pass anything. This is what I have to understand now, I think. Is how does these values work? How can I pass a bunch of values when I create the store? Or if this is the best approach. I think actually maybe I don't even need the store, actually. I think I only need the store if I initialize with the layout. So I think it might be better to just separate from the store. Because I think I'm gonna have to put the values, but I have to figure this out as well, because I'm gonna have to put the values on for the physics simulation, I think, here. But maybe it's not necessary as well, now that I think about it. Because it's fundamentally different the way that I'm doing from the way that they were doing. Because I can manipulate the meshes directly, the positions of the meshes. So I don't need, like, the thing that changes when you manipulate directly, and it can be a problem, is that it doesn't trigger re-renders on React, I think. And I think the other way it triggers re-renders because it changes the props. But if you just change the position of the nodes and you don't update the nodes, then I think it doesn't re-render. Which I think is probably better. It's probably better in some ways because maybe it's more efficient because it doesn't involve React to change the positions. But in other ways it might be worse because you depend on the state of the whole thing to change. So let me think about it. Also, I can remove this, but I'm hesitant to remove this stuff here because it was used on some functions that I thought were nice. I think the main one is to centralize, which I want to do eventually as well. Just put the focus on the node that you select. So let me think, what should I do here? Maybe, I think I'm gonna remove the drags because I don't need it anymore. I'm gonna remove the edge context menus. Actually, I have to understand why they did it like this. Why is it a set? It's kind of hard to stream these things because I feel like I have to just spend some time thinking about what is the best way. And this is it has been like that since the beginning of the project, where like the difficult part is to think about how to do the thing. And doing is relatively easy. So maybe if I just remove this function, or just comment it out, the thing is I don't understand these visible nodes as well. It's so many functions. I think this is for the thing that one example that they do where it allows you to collapse nodes based on the one that was selected. So yeah, that's which I think might be interesting as well, but I don't want to deal with understanding these functions now. I think I'm gonna put a timer here, so then I'll think about whether or not I'm gonna continue to stream, or I'm gonna take a break. Take a break and continue to stream, or stop streaming. Yeah, I'm not sure if I should spend time understanding this now. It's very annoying, to be honest, to understand how this works. But I think I kind of have to, because... Or I can just comment it out. But the thing is that it sets the nodes based on these ones in the beginning. Oh no, it sets based on the results. No, but when it builds the graph, yeah, it passes these nodes when it builds the graph. So maybe I don't need to understand actually. No, I'll think about this later. Because there's so many things to understand. So let me think. Yeah, then I wouldn't need this request animation frame here. The problem is that I'm not sure. Let me just put this outside and see if it's gonna change anything. I think it doesn't change anything. So I think I can remove the request animation frame here. And this is used here to update the layouts. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna remove this one and I'm gonna remove this as well. And then I'm gonna create the customization components. And instead of making, well, it's still, no, actually it's not gonna be dependent on props. I think that's the difference. That the way that I'm doing now is receiving the props and then is calling the function based on whatever props it was, and then selecting the layout based on that. But I think it's much better to put it on the customization component. And then I just make the function separate. But the problem is the customization would still... Yeah, I think the tricky thing is how to build the customization, because one way would be to receive the props, and another way is to make it based on the... I think it needs to be based on the input, obviously. So the question is, and this is another thing that I don't like that much, is because there's so many props being passed, you have to pass like this. So maybe this it's not very good. Because then it becomes hard to understand what is being passed from one component to the other. And there are a lot of functions that I don't understand yet, related to these modes as well. So I think I need to make a list of all the props that it receives. I think that's what I need to figure out, because that's gonna be... And then I just list... I'm gonna need all the props, because I have to know what things to pass inside of the function. The other thing that is kind of difficult to think about is that I'm not really sure how to make it work with... Like, because if I, for example, if I put the input to call the function with an event listener, call a function that calls the other function by changing the values based on whatever input it is, then I'm not sure if it would update automatically, like the way that it does here. Or if it is a bad way to do it. Like, maybe it's a better way to just put the values on the store and then make the thing based on the values, and then whenever you change this, it changes the value on the store, and then because you change the value on the store, it changes the layout. I think that might make more sense. So what should I do? Another approach is to create another store and then wrap the everything. But I'm not sure if that makes sense. I think the biggest problem is the way that I have to do it there with the store. True. The way that I'm initializing the store is kind of annoying. I am pressing everything, I think, the way that it is now, through the store. Everything the components receives through props and passing through the store, I think. So I'm thinking about whether or not is, like, what is the best approach? Should do it like here? Or I can just like put some like this, the same way that they did it on the other ones, and then I can pass here all the values inside of the set layouts. Or best put a layout current here, or something like that, in the same way that they did it there. And then I can just do another one set current layout. And then inside of the set current layout, I spread the state, and then I set whatever, or I can do the way that it is here. I think this one is better probably. Just calling the set function again. And it returns the states. Yeah, so right now the way that I'm doing is putting the X and Y on the meshes, and then I have the positions on the groups. It's kind of a little bit confusing as well, but I think it's better. But I'm still using this get node position because all of the layouts use the same function there. They use the transform graph function. And as far as I can understand, the only thing that this function does is it changes the positions. I think I can erase this stuff here. But the thing is that it sets the nodes, I think, based on this. Yeah, because this is going to be returned as a result. So I guess this is one question, is if it's probably gonna mess up, I think, the graphs if I don't set here. Yeah, this is the issue. But what if I just sat with the nodes and edges? And if I sat after... Yeah, I think it doesn't change. Because then I wouldn't be building the layout here. So I think that the only reason why this matters as well is because I'm using the nodes and edges on the component here to add to the scene. I get the ones from the store. So I think if I, instead of doing that, I just did it with the meshes, then it doesn't matter. So I think that's the first thing that I'm trying to do. Because inside of the build graph, I'm using the meshes now. I'm passing everything through the meshes. So I think if I put node meshes there, yeah, that's the first thing that I'm gonna do. then it doesn't matter if it's set or not, because I'm creating that on the build graph in the beginning. And then I'm using these ones, and then I don't have to trigger a diffing, I think. But I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't work. So I think I have to set the state, otherwise it doesn't re-render and then it doesn't add the stuff to the scene. Oh, maybe it's because of the way that I'm adding here. Yeah, so if I'm mapping over the things, that I just need to add the thing itself. So maybe it does work. Nice. I thought it might be because I have to set the state to update. Yeah, so let me think about it. I think this is the best approach, probably, doing everything on the meshes, because then everything related to the scene is directly connected with the classes that are connected with three.js, are from three.js. So I think this is the best way. And then I still have the nodes and edges as props, but the only purpose for them is to set the data from outside of the visualization. Oh, I changed the current layout there. Yeah, this is the problem. Yeah. Maybe I have to open the other project to see how this... But I think that the other one, the issue is that the Zustan version that they were using was different, so it's gonna be different as well, the way that they pass these values to the store. I'm not sure if I wanna figure that out right now, because it's probably annoying to figure out. So let me think about it. Maybe the first thing I should do before I do anything is just try to simplify this function. But I think the problem is that I don't understand these other functions here. Yeah, maybe I should erase these things first, because now I'm using the meshes. So I think Because the only thing that I need to do in my mind is to loop over the edges again and then just set the positions. Because now I have the positions from the layouts. And I don't even need the layout as well now because I'm putting everything on the nodes, on the meshes. So I can just loop over the meshes and then set the position. Actually, I'm putting on the node, I think. I'm putting on the node on the graph. No, I'm putting on the meshes here. Oh yes, I'm putting on the meshes so it works here because I'm accessing the mesh. So this is the mesh, then it has the position. The position attribute of the mesh is from three.js. But when you access, this is a little bit confusing, that's what I mean. But I think it's better that way. So I have everything on the mesh, but I'm accessing the mesh from the nodes from the graph. And this is another thing that I think I have to simplify, but then the problem is I have to understand the graphology algorithms. And the issue is that I don't have a lot of time, so I think I just need to leave it like this for now, and then set everything up with the customization, and then try to, this is another problem because I'm not sure. I know that it's going to be very hard to implement the Vue.js stuff, because Vue.js is on 2D and three.js is in 3D, and then I'm gonna have to search like all the functions from Vue.js, which I think I was doing before, and then I'm gonna have to get all these algorithms and translate them so that they work here. So I'm gonna have to initialize forces, I think, something like that in the beginning. So instead of using Rapier as the engine, we're initializing Rapier in the beginning and then putting on the nodes. I'm gonna put the forces on the meshes themselves, but it's gonna be very hard, I think, and I don't have a lot of time. Because on top of all of that, I still have to study a bunch of stuff about compilers and interpreters. So, to be honest, I think I'm not gonna have enough time. I think it's just too difficult until the build space stuff starts. But it's whatever. As long as I'm making progress, I think it's fine. So the thing here is that I think that this other stuff here doesn't matter for the way that I'm doing now. And I think it might be better to just get rid of all these functions and do them, like, if I need them, do them from scratch again. I think that might be better. Like, it's not very good because then I lose the functionality that they had for selecting the nodes and for collapsing the nodes. But I think it's gonna be less time probably to do my own thing, and then to try to understand what they did and integrate. I think that might be better. So let me see what happens if I just delete everything here. So in my mind, the only thing that I need is the mesh, the node meshes, and the edges. Now I'm thinking about whether or not I can pass the edge meshes here and then I loop over the meshes instead. But I think I probably can't do that. So it's probably better to just pass the graph. But then the issue is that you have two different things, like changing the same thing. But I guess it doesn't matter because I'm accessing the mesh through the node. So I am changing the node by default, and the node's not gonna change. Like I'm not gonna do anything with the node. The only thing that matters is the mesh. I think this way is good enough for now, I think. Because obviously what I can do is just pass the meshes and then I just update the meshes based on the different attributes that the mesh has. And I think that's probably faster than looping with this function from the graph. And the graphology, because I think on the graphology has more information for each thing. But maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. The thing is that it might change here. And the best way is probably to delete and see if it changes anything. But then the problem is that it might change something and I don't realize right away. Because the thing still works. No, fuck it. Let me delete everything. And then if I do that, then I don't need all the other props. So let me think about this. Because another thing I can do is just do another function. Another file or the same file. The only thing that the function needs to do is just update the positions. So the layout gets the positions and sets the attributes on the meshes. And then the function... But... Yeah, I think that the props are only necessary for the layout. Because that's gonna determine the forces and velocity and things like that. So I think that's... Or should I put the... Should I update the functions immediately? Like, should I update the... That way I wouldn't need the transform graph function. Because if the whole point of the layout function is to get the new positions and then I'm setting the positions here, like it doesn't make sense to create another function just to loop over the nodes if I'm already passing them to the layouts. Let me think. Because the biggest problem is this other functions here, because it might change fundamentally the way that it works. But I think if I want to change anything else on the layout, then it's going to change the structure of the layout. So I'm not really sure. I think these functions are in case there are collapsed nodes in the graph. Yeah, I think for my case, they are useless, probably. So I think it's probably better to do it like this. So I don't even need this function. I think I'm gonna leave this function like this, because I need it on the future. Let me see if removing this is gonna change anything there. This is because it changed something else. Oh, let's see if maybe it is necessary. It's using these nodes. Oh, it's getting from the map. And it creates the map here. I think this it's not gonna fuck up now because I'm not setting the nodes, but It doesn't feel... So I think I'm gonna leave the function like this, and then I'm gonna create another, or I'm gonna set the position on, as I create the layouts. That's the best thing to do now. So for each layout, I just loop over the meshes. I receive the meshes as an argument, and then I just update the positions right after I create the layouts. I think that's better. The thing is about this step. But I think for the way that I'm doing things, it's probably not that big of a deal, because I think it would be better to update the nodes and edges later if you want to display an animation, because then it's going to start from the 0 position where the nodes are currently at, and then based on the tick, it's going to advance the simulation to the other position. And then you can create some logic that is going to put that on a function and then determine based on the frame how many steps you want. So the way that they are doing here now, it doesn't... they're not doing based on the request animation frame, I think. But they are determining how much the simulation is gonna advance based on the tick counts. Right here. And this is another function that comes from the object that is just, I think is just gonna do more calculations based on the simulation. And I think from what I've seen, I think they use some stuff that is similar to the way that Vue.js does. I think D3 uses similar stuff from the way that Vue.js uses, which is a Barnsut simulation or something like that. So the question is, should I create another file, another folder, and then, or should I just delete this stuff here? I think what I'm gonna do is, instead of putting here, I just advance here, and then yeah, I think that what happens is that the x and y is going to be connected with the simulation here. So every time you call this function, it's going to change the x and y for all the nodes, which are the nodes that you pass in the arguments. Somewhere here. So this is the main point where it connects the nodes with the simulation. If it doesn't have this, it doesn't work. So I think I'm gonna change the functions because it's probably better. Instead of returning anything, I just... and then I loop over the meshes here. And then I don't need this stuff. Also don't need this. So for now, what I'm gonna do is just, like I said, keep the first state is gonna be just the random positions of the nodes, and then I'm gonna trigger this based on an event that is gonna come from the customization component. I think that's the best way. The problem is how do I update that? I think I can just loop over the graph as well. I don't need this stuff. I think it's much better to do this way because then as well I can just look at the other projects again if I want to implement the functionality to collapse nodes. I think that it is a very good thing to have like as an option, because a lot of the graphs it becomes really hard, especially if there's like a bunch of edges that are interconnected. It becomes really hard to see the nodes and the labels. So like having the option to collapse some nodes to clear the graph in some parts should be good. The problem here is the thing about the nodes again, because when you loop here it only has access to the edges. So I'm gonna have to spend some time thinking about it now, because I have to think about the best way to do this. So it would be good if I can just, like, I'm gonna try to think about a way that I can use this loop here to cache. I think the mesh has the ID, it has the node ID. So instead of doing like this, I can just do it from the mesh, and I can just put the map here. Just gonna do an object. I think I'm gonna see the difference between maps and objects, because I don't remember really well. I know there's it's kind of controversial. It is another one of those things where people are gonna be split because of the symmetry, like everything else.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Yeah, but what I'm gonna do here is let's do like this. So I fucked it up. Maybe because I'm not setting anything. So let me think. I'll be right back. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna think about this. I figured out, I think, the problem. It's just the layouts. Oh, it's because I deleted from here. Hmm. Let me go back. I want to see if I can figure out an easier way to get the edges from the graphology graph. Like get the length of our edges without having to loop through them. Actually, let me... I'm gonna leave it like this. And then I'm gonna search.
In JavaScript, both maps and objects are used to store data, but they have some differences in terms of their features, use cases, and behavior. Let's explore the main differences between maps and objects. Key types, objects. In objects, the keys can only be strings or symbols. If you try to use other data types, for example, numbers, JavaScript will implicitly convert them to strings. Maps. In maps, the keys can be of any data type, including primitive data types, for example, numbers, strings, booleans, and objects. Iteration order. Objects. The iteration order of object properties is not guaranteed to be the same as the order in which they were added. In practice, modern JavaScript engines usually maintain insertion order, but it is not specified in the ECMA script specification until ES 2021. Maps. The iteration order of map entries is always the order in which the entries were added, making it easier to predict and maintain a specific order of elements. Size property. Objects. There is no built-in property or method to directly get the size, number of properties, of an object. To get the size, you need to manually count the keys or use third-party libraries. Maps. Maps have a size property that allows you to directly get the number of key value pairs in the map. Built-in methods and functions. Objects. Objects do not have built-in methods for common operations like getting the size, iterating through keys or values, or easily cloning an object. Maps. Maps come with a variety of useful built-in methods like set, get, has, delete, clear, and methods for iterating such as for each. Inheritance. Objects. Objects in JavaScript inherit properties from object.prototype. Maps. Maps do not inherit properties from any prototype, making them more straightforward and less likely to have unintended behavior. Use cases. Objects. Objects are commonly used when you need a simple data structure to represent an entity or a collection of key value pairs. They are widely used in JavaScript for various purposes. Maps. Maps are preferred when you need to associate data with arbitrary keys, maintain a specific order of insertion, or when the keys are not known until runtime. Here's an example demonstrating the differences. JavaScript copy code / object.
Nice. So I think for simple use cases, you use an object, and then for more complex ones, you use a map. Let's see if it works. Yeah, doesn't work. Fuck. I was just thinking about the thing. I was gonna refresh the page there, but Yeah, so one approach is just pass the meshes as well. The edge meshes. The other one is to figure out the graphology. But I think there isn't an easy way to know, so I think I'm gonna have to loop over the edges. And one thing that I just realized is that I should probably... I have to see how to clean the 3.js objects from the scene. Because every time that it renders, the graph gets cleaned. Otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah, here. But I think this is the reason why it's creating multiple different visualizations every time I save, is because I'm not removing when it unmounts. So I need to see how can I clear on 3.js scene. Or maybe when I unmount there. But I'm not sure if that's the best way to do. It's here. I don't want to think about this now, so I'm gonna try to just do it based off the meshes. It's probably not that important. It's just yeah, I'm gonna do this stuff based on customizations as well, so should probably just put a default. Like whatever number I put here, I can make as this one directly. I think that makes more sense actually. And then I think that the best way is to put good defaults and then allow as much customization as possible. I think that's at least the way that I would like to use it. So it doesn't matter that much, I think. So I'm gonna try it like this first. If it doesn't work, I'm just gonna pass directly there. I was gonna complain about the edges as well. I think this one doesn't come from the library, it comes from the other code from the other library, the React graph, I think. So I mean, maybe it's just better to loop. This is one of the reasons, I think the main reason why it's probably better to just try to move away from this using graphology and just copy their algorithms. Like, I don't understand why they did it like this. So maybe there should be something here. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me to not have something like that. To get the length of the edges or to just loop over the objects themselves instead of the IDs. But it might be because of the way that they structure everything so that the algorithms should create the layouts are easier to do, but it's very annoying. I think this is a very big problem as
The
well.
mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience.
Like, the issue is that you're always going to depend on packages, I think, because it's just more efficient to use packages, obviously. Because if you have to do the whole code yourself, it's a lot more work. But then the issue is that every package that you introduce becomes a black box, and then it loses flexibility. And I think that's the main issue with human beings, and it's because we don't scale on space-time, because there's no coordination, because there's no alignment of values, and because it's like a paradox in some way, because it's very complex. So because nobody knows the structure of everything and what direction we are going, because nobody knows the meaning of life, because there isn't, in this, the byproduct of that is that there isn't a cohesive force that connects everyone. Like, there is, which is empty, but it's not scalable. So what happens is that at scale, because I have everyone working at separate things at the same time, and each one has their own goals, the packages are created, but they are not flexible enough. to handle the complexity of everything. So the more black boxes you introduce to the project, the harder it becomes to understand. But then, like, on the positive side is that it's easier to get coordination as well, because then, like, someone, if you're gonna hire someone, if they know the library, then they're gonna know, like, it's gonna be easier for them to understand the code. So, which is another paradox. But the problem is that you lose flexibility. So, and there's always this trade-off, I think. So the more packages you use, the less flexible it becomes, and then you have to do, you need to change things to some degree to make it work. But then the issue is that you're trapped by the way that they designed whatever library you're using. So what ends up happening is that their errors compound, I think, and then it becomes very difficult, because then, like, packages are built on top of this merging of packages, because people find different solutions, then they put them together, because the solutions are not flexible enough, but then they don't want to spend time to break down all the solutions and just make something new, because it's not efficient to do that as well, because it costs more energy. It's related to time as well, because everyone's forced based on the market economy to race. So, and in a way based on the entropy of the universe, like, everyone's racing. But then it compounds, and it becomes like the higher you go, the worse it becomes, I think. So this is another thing that I was thinking about, is whether or not it's worth it for me to try to redo this stuff, because if in the future I want to hire someone, then it's going to be harder for them to understand. And it's much easier for them if I'm using the libraries, because if they know the libraries, and also for me to hire someone, I can hire based on whether or not they know the libraries that I'm using. So the challenge is, how do you find the middle ground, I think. And the biggest problem is with AI is that because everyone is racing, and we have to, because that is the natural equilibrium of the market economy, it becomes impossible, I think. Because it's gonna be, and this is the issue. I think this I read on I listened to the audiobook on the Unabomber, and it's one of the points that I agree with him, that I believe that he said that what's gonna happen is that the system's gonna become so complex that no one understands what's going on, and then everyone's doing things without understanding why they're doing them. And then that's the point where everyone becomes a slave to the system, which is already happening, but there is a escape velocity limit, I think, and the limit is the power of the computation of the collective consciousness. Because if something breaks down today, the way that it works is you have a bunch of experts, and then the experts come and then coordinate to solve the issues. But then as the complexity of the reality scales exponentially, then there isn't any expert, or the amount of experts decrease exponentially as well to the problems, because the problems scale exponentially. So when something breaks down, one problem is that no one knows how to fix it, and the other one is, like, things are so complex that people are just doing things for the sake of doing them without understanding why. So I think I'm just gonna, I actually have to, I'm gonna go back to the way that it was before. I was gonna say I'm just gonna loop over the edges and then just create or just do a counter, something like that. Or call reduce. And I don't like reusing the reduce because it's very confusing. But I think all I have to do is just sum the values, but the problem is I think it needs the object, the edges themselves here, or this thing. I comment this out sometimes and I saw that it doesn't make a difference for the current layout, but I didn't test with the other ones. So I assume that it's probably gonna have some difference. But I also think that there is a, even though it's a paradox, I think that the best course of action probably is to try to, it's kind of like what Elon is doing with Neuralink, but like there's a bunch of issues with that as well. But like increase the efficiency in which we understand things, because I think there's a threshold where like once you understand all the complexity of the biosphere and how everything is connected, then the problem is that it's going to scale exponentially through infinity, because it's going to depend on the whole universe, obviously. So how everything is connected, and then that's impossible to compute. But I think there is a threshold where that you can create some stability if you understand how everything is connected, at least for some time. But then, yeah, I think that's just the essence of the universe, because the flow of time is increasing of information. I think those things are the same thing. So that's the reason why people don't like time, because it creates pain, because the whole natural desire for everyone is to keep the state that they're at, like the comfort zone, because that maximizes efficiency or minimizes energy and minimizes risk. So in one side, everyone wants to keep things the same way that they are, and then time creates the pressure, which is going to be the difference in states that is going to create pain. So time is pain, and then information is the process of building, which is pleasure. I think they are connected. Like you can't have one without the other. So the essence of time is the increase of information. It's going to be the interaction of the electromagnetic field, and it's the essence of computation, I think, because I think computation is the reduction of infinite potential to a fixed state, which is the illusion of space-time. So that's also another symmetry, I think, between information and physics. I think is the same thing at the bottom layer, because everything has to be the same thing at some point, because the perception is the projection of relativistic distinctions, which is geometry, I think, and information. Because geometry, I think, is just density. Mass, I think, is just density over patterns, and patterns are information. And I think that's the flow of information. Like the more dense something becomes, the more mass it has. Actually, it is not. Obviously, it depends on the volume. Like, but I think these things are related. Like the pattern creates the mass, and then the flow is to always gain more mass, which is gravity. And then because everything is trying to do the same thing, that's the multifactor geometry of the structure of information of an identity that creates the illusion of space-time, I think. The problem is, how do I... Maybe I think I'm gonna open the other project, it's just easier. Just copy there. I don't want to think about this. I'm just gonna put the edges again here because I don't want to think about it. But then maybe I should just remove this stuff as well. It's not that important, I think. Yeah, I don't care about the layouts that much, I think. It's probably better to spend time trying to figure out the VJS, because I think this way is probably the best. I really like this approach. And then if I want some different layouts, then I can think about it. Because I think that the best way to think about the layouts, obviously the layouts that they have are already going to be like based on what is the best way to visualize a graph. So the maximum amount of edges, or the maximum amount of visibility for the nodes and edges, I think. So it is good to have them, but I think it's not that important to... maybe I just leave like with the edges as well, like this. It's not that important to optimize, so I don't have an extra loop here. Because it probably is not gonna run a bunch of times as well. Yeah, but I think that's... it's probably better to optimize this stuff later, because it's gonna come with the more I think about the actual process of getting the data. I think that's the important thing, because it's gonna define what are the best ways to manipulate the visualization to understand what is going on. Because I don't have the nodes. Let me see if I remove if I replace with the node meshes. I think it probably comes from here. Let's... or maybe it's somewhere else. So it doesn't work with the meshes. No. Well, maybe it's because of the... I remember that the node meshes were an empty list in the first render, I think. Or something else, but maybe it's not because of that, because how would it work in the previous way? I could just pass the nodes as well here. Nodes and edges instead of passing, or pass the graph and the nodes. Because I think I need the graph here. Hmm. Yeah, so maybe is the state because I'm not setting new nodes. I think this is the issue. So I think this is probably the initial position of each one, and then, but it's weird that the edges were updated. Maybe it's because I'm updating the nodes just looping over the meshes. But I don't see why that would be the case because I'm not changing this state there. Let me think about this. Could either be the state or the way that I'm updating here. I think it's because I'm not updating. But the layout should be here, so. What if I return this step here? Or I can just do it here. And it looks like it's still not. So here is probably the right one, but it's still not removing the nodes as well. The layout's kind of weird as well. But I think the layout's weird because it changed. Oh, and now it's fucking up the edges. I think it's weird because it changed the counts. I don't remember though. That's still 100. So now I have to think about why is it fucking up the drag as well. Because I think the drag I did based on the thing. Oh, I'm making based on the edges, that's why. So I need to change this to work with the mesh. Or with the graph, actually. I think I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna figure this stuff out off stream. But in my mind, there could be just two explanations. One of them is because I'm not setting the state, which I think is the most likely the reason, and the other one is because I'm updating incorrectly. But I think it's because of the state. Because it renders twice, and then in the first time the nodes are still on the initial position. And because I'm not updating the nodes with the state, then it creates the two different ones. I think that's what's happening. So I think I'm gonna stop here. After I finish this, then I think I'm gonna... Yeah, I need to get to a point where all the layouts are just changing the position, and I have to figure this out as well. Maybe I'll pass the set edges and set nodes here inside, and then I set the state after the layouts. Or maybe it's just better to do the other way, where it's updating, like creates the layout first and then updates later. Might be the reason why they did it the way they did it. And then once I got to the points, then I think I'm gonna try to make it like this first, because it's just better. But I think I need to figure out a way to change the state so that the previous nodes... It is a problem as well, because it looks like it's not removing the nodes here. But maybe it is. Because it would be better if you could just click the button and then call the function and then change the position of the nodes to the new one. Because if I have to update the other way, I think I have to think about a way to either like through the store or create a function here and then make it the way that it was before, but then it's gonna depend on props, I think. So obviously I can create a custom component that is gonna change the props that this receives, and then it's gonna update. But I think it's not that efficient because it probably runs everything. There's probably a way to just run the positions again, or to just update the nodes and edges. Because when React re-renders, is gonna compare everything and then see what props changed. So I think if I manage to just change the nodes and the edges themselves, it probably updates faster, I think. So I think the best approach is probably to figure out how to change the positions here, and then I set new nodes maybe. Or instead of changing the position, I set the meshes with the new position. So another thing that I can do is just pass an empty object or something like that in the layout functions. Because all of the thing is that, yeah, it needs to accept the nodes because it needs the IDs or the position of each one. I think the main question that I have to clarify more, which is still confusing, is which one is better to just like use the nodes and edges that I receive from props, or use the three.js objects to updates. I think using the three.js objects is better because is better for updating the visualization, because then for the customization components, it's going to be everything on the three.js object, but then using the nodes and edges is better for React because of the rendering, I think. And there's probably a middle way, which is use both, which I think is probably the best, but I'm not really sure. Which would be to just pass it, instead of passing the meshes, I pass the nodes, and then I update the meshes based on the nodes, the same way that I was doing before. Then I set the nodes again after this function. After the layout gets called, they set the nodes. The same way that they were doing there. So maybe the only difference would be, like I put this, yeah, but the problem is, this has to be, instead of putting this here, I put this on the customization components. I think this is the best approach. So I think I was trying to, yeah. I think I'm gonna stop here, then I'm gonna continue to work on this. And not sure when I'm gonna come back, but yeah, next thing that I'm gonna do is try to fix the layout functions and then work on the customization so that I change the layout. Then after I figure out the layout, I think I'm gonna study the VJS stuff. Try to implement the physics on the graph. So